It's like Donald Trump is losing everything, but he will not let go to this. I will support Israel no matter what position. And it's wild to say. Evidently, Mike Huckabee met with him several times in Israel and has been lobbying for him for years. Who even has an argument on the other side? And I don't know. It's just one more example of this whole thing collapsing.
Dave Smith just ripped the Trump administration for escalating the MAGA civil war that's playing out on the right, mostly pertaining and surrounding the issue of Israel and the Israel first mentality. And in this clip, he talks about how this relates to the recent example of Mike Huckabee, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, meeting with convicted Israeli spy Jonathan Pollard, and how this is affecting the perceptions of the American right toward this administration. So let's watch it. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
There was like kind of, at the time there was some feeling that there's a civil war within the Democratic Party, but it was never quite anything like what we're witnessing right now on the right wing. I mean, for example, there were leftist commentators who disagreed with liberal commentators, but I think Mark Levin and Tucker Carlson more than just disagree. I think Ben Shapiro and Nick Fuentes they don't just go, well, we have a slight difference of opinion on a few issues, but we're part of the same big tent. Like, there's a civil war going on. Trump is bleeding. This is a major political problem for the Trump administration. And what's it all over? People say that they'll say that I'm obsessed with Israel, or all I ever want to talk about is Israel, or something like that. Believe me. Much like, think about lockdowns, Rob. Think about how obsessed I was with lockdowns. They come up every now and then because it was a major thing that happened there. But like, I don't know. I'm happy to not talk about this shit anymore. But right now, this is the thing to talk about. The thing that really lost Donald Trump so much support from his own base. There were two things, right? We said it the other day. It was launching a war in Iran, and it was covering up the Jeffrey Epstein story. Okay, Donald Trump carried the youth a year ago. Now he's bleeding. He's down like 50 points amongst the youth. Well, what is that about? What is it that the youth don't like about Donald Trump? Well, they sure don't like that he's been facilitating this genocide for the last 2 years, but since he's been in it, he's continued the Biden policy.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And Dave's correct. There was something of a Democratic civil war, especially in 2016 in the presidential election campaigns, the clash between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. But we're really not seeing anything like what we are seeing playing out on the right. As Trump, he could say, hey, here's what Trump has done. He's weighed two possible decisions. A, I can salvage my presidency by stopping this absurd Israel first mentality that people are noticing more and more, and people are peeling off of me because of my support for that position, as it pertains to Israel, the Epstein files, bankrolling the genocide in Gaza, etc., which is a schism on the right. Or I can dig my heels in on that, take the brunt of this disastrous peel off in terms of my support, and still maintain the Israel first mentality. And he's chosen the latter. We are seeing that play out, and it does revolve around Israel and Epstein. And by the way, Israel and Epstein are connected. What a coincidence there, too, as we know about Epstein's connections, as he actually worked for Israel. Murtaza Hussein and Ryan Grim have shown that. 5 separate examples of that we've talked about on this program before. So that's just what's going on here. This is surrounding the Israel issue. And if you want to tell us we're obsessed, that's downstream from our criminal regime's obsession with Israel that draws us into new wars, bankrolls genocides, covers up a child sex trafficking ring for a guy that just coincidentally, had connections to Israel. That's what's going on.
And I was thinking it again with this Pollard scandal. It's just hard to not go like, dude, these all come down to the same issue. It's like such a thorn in the side. And it's just interesting to see how much this administration will just tarnish its own legacy over refusing to hold on to that thing. You know, it's did I use this analogy? I used this once before, Rob. I don't know if it was about this, but you remember the episode of The Simpsons where Homer Simpson gets his arm stuck in the vending machine, and then hours and hours later, someone goes, "Sir, are you still holding on to the snack?" And then he goes, "But why are you asking?" You know, it turns out he lets go and can get out of it. It's like Donald Trump is losing everything, but he will not let go to this. I will support Israel no matter what position, and it's wild to see.
Well, yeah, and the fact that Israel and Epstein are apparently both tied together does not help.
Yeah. Well, you know, the somebody asked yesterday, we did a members only episode, and I wasn't planning on talking about it, but someone asked the question about Jonathan Pollard. And I had not seen then, I saw since then that he's actually, there's an interview of him, and then I guess there's some reporting that has corroborated this, that it's not just that Mike Huckabee had him to the White House. It's that evidently Mike Huckabee met with him several times in Israel and has been lobbying for him for years. Pollard says he's like a hero to him. He's a good personal friend, and he made sure to check in on his wife and like take care of her while he was dealing with his parole situation or whatever exactly the thing was. And it's just like, dude, for people who don't know, because even yesterday when we were talking about it, you know, it's like I knew Pollard. I had read about him a while back. I knew the deal. Like I knew he was an Israeli spy who got busted and convicted for it. But I couldn't remember. I think me and you were both we were like, wait, was that the time Israel sold the secrets to the Chinese? Or was that the time they sold it to the Soviet? But no, it was the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Like, just to think about this for a second. So here's the story, right? You got this guy Pollard. He's spying on behalf of the Israelis, bringing back like military secrets for them. He gets caught. He gets sentenced to life in prison. He does 30 years and gets out. Now, Israel takes the information and they traded it to the Soviet Union in exchange for them allowing a bunch of Jewish Russians or it might not have just been Russians. It might have been like Soviet, satellite countries, but like for to allow emigration.
Yeah, that's exactly right. This is widely documented. I don't think Dave's right that Huckabee ever met Pollard in the White House. I don't think Pollard ever went to the White House after his release. And there's a lot of misinformation or confusion about the whole Pollard thing. Pollard did initially receive a life sentence with the possibility of parole. Now, Pollard got that parole under the Obama administration in 2015, and the terms of his probation were 5 years. Well, in those 5 years, that lapsed toward the end of the Trump administration, and the Trump's DOJ voluntarily did not extend the parole terms, meaning that he no longer had to remain in the United States. So guess what he did? He boarded Miriam Adelson's private jet, flew it to Israel, the red carpet was rolled out for him, and he was greeted as a hero by our greatest ally in the Middle East, with Benjamin Netanyahu greeting him on the tarmac, and with Pollard kissing the ground there before shaking Netanyahu's hand. We just get slapped in the face by this greatest ally, and it totally is preposterous. And Americans are picking up on this. It isn't the first issue that a lot of them care about, but more and more are caring about it.
Of a bunch of Jews to go to Israel. So, like, again, really take a step back and think about that. The Cold War, lasted from 1945 to 1991. In this war, in this Cold War, which by the way, it's called the Cold War, but like there's several hot wars in there, like the war in Korea, the war in Vietnam. These are all part of the Cold War. Now think about what America did during the Cold War. We spent trillions of dollars on wars, trillions of dollars on military, like crazy military Pentagon budgets, defense, whatever you want to call it, budgets. We fought proxy conflicts all over the world. We had our CIA topple democratically elected governments. We had our CIA topple non-democratically elected governments. We funded the Contras in Nicaragua and shipped cocaine into the United States of America. This was all done, under the banner of fighting communism.
Absolutely. Invaded Grenada, supported Iraq at first in the Iraq-Iran war, later supported Iran, supported the Mujahideen in Afghanistan to fight the Soviets, some of which included, what were the germ of future terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda. Dave is right. This went on throughout history, throughout several decades, with the U.S. spending $13 trillion in 1996 dollars, adjusting it for inflation as it came to 1996, on this Cold War. And Jonathan Pollard, the guy that just met with Huckabee, convicted spy, sent U.S. secrets to Israel, our greatest ally, sends those secrets to Israel, which were passed off to the Soviet Union at the height of the Cold War.
Okay? Like, there's as William F. Buckley himself said, right? In order to fight the Soviet menace, we have to erect, and I quote, a totalitarian bureaucracy within our shores. It was the justification for the military-industrial complex's existence. Essentially, we gave up on the American experiment because we said the Soviet Union was such a big, bad threat. And then you get a spy gets caught handing off top secret, not like it wasn't like information that was like, oh, like, whatever. This was something you had to be an FBI agent to have, like, top secret information.
Yeah, Dave is right. Some of this information included nuclear secrets. Now, before Pollard passed on those nuclear secrets, the Soviets had detonated a nuke, mostly because of espionage from Klaus Fuchs, who was in the Manhattan Project, German physicist, and the Rosenbergs. So the Soviets had detonated a nuke, but Pollard gave more nuclear secrets to Israel, which were passed on. And we're just supposed to believe there's nothing wrong with this, nothing to see here. This is just some anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, right? And it doesn't matter that Huckabee meets with Pollard, because after all, that's what the White House said. Carolyn Leavitt, when responding to this, says, "We weren't aware about the liaison, but once we found out, we stand behind the ambassador." That is the slap in the face Americans get every single time. That's the true obsession with Israel. It's from our criminal regime, not us daring to talk about how backward that is. That's downstream from their evil.
A spy gets caught handing that information over to the Israelis, who then give it to the Soviet Union, your enemy. That was the reason that we sacrificed so much. And you're telling me this guy was not only was he not the result of that wasn't that this guy gets publicly executed and then Israel is cut off forever and never considered an ally again. Oh no, none of that. In fact, they still get unconditional support. They get more foreign aid than any other country has since that time.
And they still did after bombing the USS Liberty in 1967, too, under the context of the 6-Day War. They can kill 34 American sailors, wound over 100 others, and just nothing to see here. Continue the unconditional aid. After October 7th, continue even ramping up the aid. $25 billion since then in U.S. aid to Israel. Bankrolling this genocide. And yeah, there's a ceasefire now. Thankfully, how long is it going to hold? The first one that Trump orchestrated only held 2 months, and you have Smotrich talking about how, hey, there's going to be Israeli settlements in Gaza. I don't think it's going to hold long. And they can bomb a U.S. ally in Qatar, a country that has the biggest U.S. airbase. No problems there. Trump can plead with the Knesset to drop corruption and fraud charges against Netanyahu and call that supervillain a war hero. Slap in the face to Americans. Every single time. AIPAC's influence, flaunting their control over U.S. congressmen. Trump boasting about how much he gave to the Adelsons on behalf of Israel. Americans are noticing. Trump doesn't care. He's willing to let it completely tarnish his presidency, as Dave said, but he still does it. That's how this iron stranglehold of the Israel lobby on our politics works. Presidents are willing to tank their own legacies to cling to it and maintain that.
They get more diplomatic cover and military protection than any other country has since that time. And the spy can go to the White House. Like, as I said yesterday, you just think about that. Like, people could try to paint it out like, oh, you got to be some type of Nazi to have a problem with that. You got to be some type of Jew hater to have a problem with that. No, any self-respecting man would find that to be an intolerable disgrace to his nation. What can you even say about that? Please, someone explain to me what the other side of that argument is, by the way. Or like, Who even has an argument on the other side? And I don't know. It's just one more example of this whole thing collapsing.
Well, don't pause and look to me to defend this.
Rob,
I
you
don't have
take the affirmative.
Yeah, I don't have the other side of that story.
The only other side I've seen in my comments section, and it's preposterous, is, hey, he did his time. He got out. He did a lot of time for doing this deed. And it's like, dude, that's not the issue. I feel like I'm in the Big Lebowski. Dude, the Chinaman is not the issue here, dude. It's that the U.S. ambassador met with him in a cordial meeting that he tried to conceal from the government, but was found out later. And even then, the government still backed it up. This guy is the most vile of criminals when it comes to crimes against your own government. It's borderline treasonous, if not treasonous, in every single way. It ranks him up there with Aldrich Ames and Duncan Lee and Harry Dexter White and the Rosenbergs and Robert Hansen for espionage that took place on behalf of other governments from within the United States. And we're just supposed to pretend that everything is fine with this. It's not. It's criminal. It robs us of our sovereignty. It's absurd. And they get away with it. They get away with this stuff when U.S. citizens wouldn't get away with it. Under FISA 702, if you talk to the wrong person overseas, they will sift through your things, pervert your due process, and engage in warrantless surveillance. But Huckabee just gets immunity from for talking to Israeli spies operating within the U.S. Insane.
Yeah, it is something though, right? Like, I don't know. There's just a certain point. I guess what it all comes down to, Rob, is that just like in a decentralized media environment, that type of shit just can't stand. It's just too juicy of a story. It's too easy for someone like me to explain. And it's too, it just leaves everybody else with like, well, there's no counter argument to that. It's just obviously correct that at the very least, that should have been enough for us to say, you don't get our foreign aid anymore, Israel. And by the way, one more little thing that I'll throw in there, the support for Israel up until 1991, like say between when America really started unconditionally supporting Israel was say like between 1967 and 1991. What was the justification for supporting Israel, Rob? It was to roll back the Soviet Union.
Yeah, that was part of their propaganda. The support for Israel, was so beneficial to the United States because there are outposts in the Middle East against the Soviet Union. And when that excuse went away, they just pivoted the propaganda to they're the only democracy in the Middle East, even though, yeah, if you're born on the wrong side of the Israeli territories in the West Bank and in Gaza, democracy isn't actually even remotely apparent in the smallest level. You're not even able to vote ultimately for those who have subjugated you and have ultimate political authority over you. So the propaganda just shifts to justify this empire building scheme and this entangling alliance that the greatest founders in the US warned about.
That was the whole thing. In fact, and this is what Benjamin Netanyahu used to always say, by the way, you know how Benjamin Netanyahu said, like, I guarantee Iran is 5 years away from a weapon like 35 times. And you know how he said, I guarantee that if you overthrow Saddam Hussein, like positive reverberations will sweep the region. Well, he also said back in the day, before he was going by Benjamin Netanyahu, I forget his original name.
Milikowski was his original name. He's an Ashkenazi, and he's a secular one at that.
Back then he said, if the Soviet Union ceased to exist, Islamic terrorism would be wiped off the face of the planet. Like, that was his talking point back then. So basically, because he was just always saying whatever he thought Americans wanted to hear to keep sending them money. And so that was their, so they were using the excuse that Israel was a hedge against the Soviet Union as Israel was delivering top secret American information to the Soviet Union.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And people wonder why there's a MAGA civil war on the right where you have the major schism between the Zionists and neocons on one side and the relatively non-interventionists on the other side, still not as non-interventionist as I'd like them to be, generally speaking. You have this playing out because this just can't be ignored. And Dave made a good point there. With the independent media, it's even more impossible to ignore now than it ever was before. I mean, these stories are going to be covered. They're not as easy for the regime to just cover up. like they were when there was the legacy media with essentially 3 cable news choices and a bunch of newspapers, and that's all you had. You might have gone to the bookstore and found niche books on some of these subjects like the CIA, but there just wouldn't be this material out there. Now it's within the reach of all of our fingertips. And this is what we are noticing. Americans on the right are sick and tired of a political movement that goes under the slogan America First or Make America Great Again, under Trump's assurance that Americanism, not globalism, will be our credo, when it turns out the Pollard scandal and things like it and many other things that have happened during Trump's administration prove definitively that it's actually Zionism and not Americanism will be our credo. That's the truth about this administration. That's what the American people are getting from this. And even if you don't follow the Israel issue, this is spilling into domestic issues. It's showing the prioritization is above Americans. And that's part of this issue, is that it's a warped perversion when Americans expect to be served when we're paying out the gazoo for food and fuel. Inflation's well above this what the CPI says, which exempts some of the most inflationary markets like real estate and food and fuel. And when we have such catastrophic debt, $38 trillion in debt, overspending the budget about $2 trillion a year, and it's spilling into hate speech and the culture war and yelling anti-Semitism if you critique Israel, and modifying hate speech codes on a local level, and inhibiting disaster relief, federal disaster relief toward organizations that are critical of Israel. This is the crux of everything, and Dave is so right that it's so important to Trump, and this is Israel First administration, not that other presidents haven't behaved similarly, but I think this is the most radical example, where he is willing to let his own administration go to the wolves, go to the dogs, just to preserve the Israel First mentality and this relationship. That's how much power Israel has over our political system. Now that is changing. Americans are waking up to that. Every poll's showing that. It just hasn't played out in the electoral politics realm yet, or in the bureaucracy. Maybe it will in 10 years. I don't know, but it's being noticed now by the culture before the politics. And politics is downstream from culture, if you agree with Andrew Breitbart and his famous quote about that, which I do. But I do want to hear from you. Is this part of the MAGA civil war? Is this what everything is revolving around? Is this what Trump is willing to do to tarnish his presidency to preserve this unholy alliance? Let me know in the comments down below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to Dave Smith. Great segment. Appreciated him covering it. And if you want to become a YouTube member, please consider clicking the join button below. You can help support my channel that way, and in return, I'll give you access to all of my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. You'll be able to watch those members-only videos right away if you do that, and I greatly appreciate it. And also, if you want a free copy of my first book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description below. I'll shoot you that out as a PDF right to your email, no charge, no obligation, just because you're awesome. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.